All right. What was the last thing that you ate that really spiked your glucose?
Probably these disappointing brownies that I talked about last time.
Disappointing brownies.
No, they taste great. They tasted great. But yeah, they were just a little too fussy of a recipe. But nevertheless, I definitely felt that glucose spike.
Yeah. Oh, man. We got an Imperfect Produce box delivered. Mm-hmm. They are now partnered with
Misfit Markets.
Misfit Market.
Yep.
And I think it's going to be next week, but the CEO of Misfits Market might be coming into the gym.
Oh, no way.
To work out. Anyway, I talked to him a couple weeks ago, and he organized a little box shipment to us.
Nate
which
and
arrived.
I are like, we are on that tip.
I know, which arrived. And they packed it full of a lot of good treats.
Oh, what was it? Okay, tell me what was in there, because I'm always looking at what they've got going on.
Well, there was a lot of snacks that my kids were really into.
Yeah.
A lot of packaged things, which I didn't used to get very much of. They had like a box of Stroop waffles, which
Pascal likes the Stroop waffle.
Yep. They sent a lot of cool meats. They sent some pita bread, which I got busy on last night.
Yeah, I like pita.
Yeah. They sent some lesser evil popcorn. That was what got stuck last night. So in my tooth.
You got to get the dental brush. That's really helpful.
The dental?
It's like a brush on a stick that's really tiny, and you can like.
Oh yeah. I know. Okay. Yeah. I didn't know I didn't know that was the name of it, but I've used all the tools. You know me.
You're a flossing aficionado.
It was not in between teeth. It was
under the gum.
It was on the inside gum line in the middle of a molar. Like so.
Oh, that's tough.
Yeah, just
you gotta get something real
there's
small.
There's no flossing that can get there.
Yeah.
So it's just you gotta anyway.
Okay. Water pick.
Oh, and then they sent some English muffins.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's a lot of things. I was like, let's get busy and jack our glucose up.
They sent me these really yummy little streusel puddings once.
Oh.
And
Nate's saying that he got some streusel puddings in his once.
Come in a really nice glass little.
Oh yeah.
Oh, the petite pot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cute.
Very nice.
They are cute.
Very nice.
Really nice.
Anyway, glad to be back on the Misfits Market, place.
I have never left them because I never leave my house to grocery shop. I must have everything delivered to me.
There you go. Anyway, I asked the question because today we're going to start off talking a little bit about glucose.
Yeah, what the heck is glucose? What's the deal?
Why are people monitoring their glucose?
Why are people wearing those things on their arm? Mm-hmm. What does that even teach you? Isn't that for diabetics? All the things.
Yeah. You've definitely caught me wearing one before. I've worn them several times.
Sure.
And I think maybe we start with just, basic glucose metabolism.
Let's do glucose 101.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Glucose 101. We have this, we in the food, plant, animal kingdom, things that we consume, there are 3 key macronutrients that are, distributed amongst all the different foods. We've got protein, we've got fat, and we've got carbohydrates. And you generally find, these paired up or by themselves in nature in the form of you find protein and fat together. You might find protein and carbohydrates together. You rarely find a food in the, in its kind of natural form in the world where there's fat and carbohydrates together. There are a few examples of that, like an avocado or a coconut. Mm-hmm. However, it's usually protein and fat when you think of animal protein.
Yeah.
It's animal flesh has got fat and protein in it. Mm-hmm. When you think of carbs that have some protein, you think of grains. There's always a little bit, quinoa's got a little bit of protein, it's got more carb. Even beans, even vegetables have trace amounts of protein in them. But anyway, that's the point, is that we have carbohydrates that are out there, and carbohydrates are our primary fuel source for energy production in the body. That is our preferred source for fuel. because carbohydrates, all the different types that are out there in the forms, when they get broken down in the body, they become glucose, sugar,
Yep.
basic sugar. And glucose is what is fed into, our metabolism, and it's broken down into ATP. ATP is this, it's like the energy currency of the body. It's like when you go to France, you've got dollars, you need to exchange those for, what's the currency there? Oh, I guess a euro.
Euros.
Euro. What was the former?
Francs.
Francs. Yeah. So you got to exchange it for euros because your dollars don't go any, they won't work in, Europe. Kind of like in our bodies, we eat glucose. We like glucose, just like Europeans like dollars, right? But they don't exchange in dollars. They exchange in euros. So we like glucose, but we don't exchange energy in glucose. We need ATP to make energy to move our muscles. So our body breaks down the glucose in our muscle tissue and different organs, different cells from glucose, and then it spits out ATP, and then we can use that. And so that process happens very quickly. All right. And that's why people say, oh, that's the preferred fuel source, is because when you have amino acids, which are from protein, you have fatty acids, which are from fat, and you have glucose, which is from carbs. If your body has a choice, it's got all three sitting there, it's going to use the glucose first because it can make ATP quickly. It's likely going to use fat second, and it's probably going to use protein or amino acids last, because the protein is really hard to turn into energy. It's an extra couple steps.
Yep.
Plus, your body wants to keep as much protein in the body as possible because that's always the lean functional tissue. It doesn't want to break down your muscle to make energy.
Yeah.
And fat is the one that's easiest to store. You have kind of an infinite amount of fat storage in your body. You can make your fat stores as big as you want. It just keeps, this is like, we have kind of the fat cells can get as big as needed to store energy. But glucose, or the sugar stores in our body, are limited. We don't have unlimited storage capacity for sugars. We have a limited amount, and that's in the form of glycogen. So glycogen is where carbohydrates go into your body. They get broken down into sugar. And if you don't need to use that sugar right away, we want to store it up in muscle glycogen and liver glycogen, so that when you do have to sprint or you do have to do something active or you need to expend some energy, it's there for you if you haven't had, a candy bar in the last hour. But it's a finite amount of fuel. So if you go and you do a super hard training session, you're on the bike and you're smashing the climbs and the mountains, people talk about bonking. Yeah. There's a point in the ride where you just bonk, because guess what? All your glycogen's gone. All the sugars that all the carbs you've had in the last couple hours, gone. And now it's like, oh shit, I don't have any of that immediate fuel source. And your body has to start shifting to using fat. And sometimes that doesn't happen quickly enough. And you start to feel your ability to produce power and energy just go crashing down.
Yeah, I remember when we were doing our precision nutrition certification, and I was reading about this and the process of how your body creates ATP or uses ATP. And I remember I was on my assault bike later that day, and it talked in the book about how, like, at a certain point, maybe like a minute into, assault bike or something, like it's a minute into activity, then that switches over as your energy source. Sure. And I was like, I can feel it. It's my ATP.
Right.
You can feel the gear if you're kind of paying the attention.
Totally.
Shift.
Yeah. You can feel gears happen, and I mean, the truth of the matter too is that there's no, it's not like you're in this one gear and then you switch over to glucose and then you switch over to fat. Like, you're always burning a little bit of everything at the same time. But there's a primary fuel source. It's also why when endurance athletes, the example that people love to give is like the cyclists in the Tour de France, like they're mid-stage, what are they drinking? What do they
Goo.
want? No, they're drinking Coca-Cola.
Oh, they're drinking Coca-Cola.
Straight up Coca-Cola out of a can.
Really?
Yes, it is like
Just pure sugar.
when they hand
as
out
fast
the
as
they hand
possible.
out the food bags to them at different points in the stage, like where they get lunch. There's Coca-Cola in most of them.
That's crazy.
And it's like, why? Because it's 50 grams of immediate sugar and something about the carbonation. It's just really like people just
they can
like
take it in quickly.
They can take it in quickly. It's just super palatable. So why? Because they need to get that so that they don't bonk, and they're constantly fueling with sugars. You know, even though it's a long event, people think, oh, long endurance, you burn fat. It's like, you will, but you also need sugars to produce that immediate power for the climbs or for the sprints or for, you're just burning up all the fuel.
Yeah, and Olympic weightlifters are always like, eat the Snickers bar between the snatches and the clean and jerks.
Yeah, I mean, and that's like, okay, an available source, you know, and a Snickers bar is fine. And, if you really wanted to nerd out on like, what's the best thing to eat, it's like, well, a Snickers bar also has a lot of, it's got nuts in it. It's got fat in it, which can slow down digestion
I
and
had
absorption.
gummy bears during my competition.
Yeah, gummy bears, right? It's like Marshawn Lynch eating Skittles between possessions. That was always his go-to thing. It's like getting a little bit of that sugar to like go out and, again, preferable energy source for performance. So that's how the sugar comes in. It's from all carbohydrates. When sugar comes when you eat a carbohydrate, you have to chew it. It then goes into the stomach, where some sugar can absorb and be digested in the mouth. There's some enzymes in the mouth that help digest carbohydrates, but most of the digestion of carbohydrates happens in the small intestine, and then it gets absorbed into the bloodstream. And so if you eat a piece of broccoli, that process of getting the carbohydrates, the sugars that are in broccoli, because there are sugars in broccoli, the process of getting that into the bloodstream is slow. It's like you're just eating a tree. You're eating like a freaking bush, and you got to do all this chewing and breaking down, right? So imagine that compared to I just drank a Coca-Cola. Well, that Coca-Cola is just liquid. It's going to go right down through your system. It's going to go, doesn't need to be digested much. It's already pre-digested, and it's just going to absorb right into the bloodstream. Even that takes more than, a minute. It takes 20 minutes, 30 minutes, but that's going to get into your bloodstream very quickly. Okay, so now we've got this idea that we have sugar coming from carbs. We have to get that into our bloodstream, right? Because when it's in your mouth and it's in your stomach, that's not providing you any energy. You got to digest it and absorb it. And then once it's in the bloodstream, that's still not a good situation. Sugar in your bloodstream is toxic. If you have elevated sugar in your blood, a lot of bad things can happen. If it gets too high, you can die. So what do? How do we get the sugar that we ate that went into our bloodstream? How do we get it out of our bloodstream? Where's it supposed to go? Well, you're not creating ATP in the blood. You're creating ATP in the muscle. You're creating ATP in the brain. You're creating ATP in the cells of the pancreas and of the liver. So we have to absorb the sugar into our blood, and then we have to get the sugar in our blood out of the blood into all of the tissues of the body that use it for energy production. How does that happen? What's the signal that says, hey, like, what does the muscle tissue do to sort of tell the bloodstream to like, hey, drop off all your sugar here. Stop. Like, I need some of that. The signal that our body uses to get those sugar molecules into the tissues is called insulin. That's it. This scary thing that everyone talks about, that everyone's just like insulin this, insulin that. It is a physiological hormonal response to keep you from getting sugar poisoning. It's highly, highly important. It's essential to life and to everything that you do. We need insulin. And guess what? When insulin comes out, it comes out in a spike generally, right? Like body senses there's sugar. Here's a little insulin, proportionate to however much sugar is there. If there's a little bit of sugar, you get a little bit of insulin. If there's a lot of sugar, a lot of insulin. One is not better than the other. It's just a proportionate response. If somebody is having a hard time hearing, you yell. It's like, that's just how you do it. Like, that's not bad, you know? Yeah, if the person's like has damaged hearing and you're yelling in their ear all the time, that could make it worse, right? Or so we'll get to that part of it, but this is just the basic of the physiology. And so insulin's important. Insulin then tells the sugar to go into the tissue, and then you get to use it.
Yep.
Insulin is also has other, it's like this, we've talked about an anabolic or anabolism. That's a term that refers to building of things, building of tissue. Insulin is anabolic. It helps with building of tissue. In the presence of insulin, tissue, and muscle tissue in particular, has greater likelihood of growth. So insulin and the sugar that is required to make insulin be produced and get put into the bloodstream, those carbs are anabolic. They help you grow. So people who have avoided carbs for a long time and then they start utilizing carbs in their training and their weight training, they start to see, oh, I'm building more muscle now. It's partly a calorie thing, but it's also partly an anabolic nature, the anabolic nature of insulin too. So that's where we're at with like what this whole thing is. And then these monitors that people are putting on, they're continuous glucose monitors. They're monitors that tell us what is the glucose level in our blood at any given time. When you wake up in the morning after you've not eaten for 8 to 10 to 12 hours, there is a level of glucose that is stable. We have a homeostatic level of glucose, this baseline that our bodies each individually keep. Generally, it's somewhere underneath 100 deciliter, or I'm gonna mess up the metric, but the unit of measure. But 100 is like below 100, maybe 90, maybe you're at 70. You're somewhere in there. You maintain that all night because you have stored carbs, sugar in your liver. So because you're not eating at night, your brain still needs to function. Your brain uses sugar, so your liver starts to kind of dole out little bits of sugar into your bloodstream so that it can go up to the brain and it can go to your heart and can go to the organs that are keeping you alive while you're sleeping. And then by the end, at some point, your liver runs out of glycogen. And so you wake up and at some point you're like, I'm hungry. I got to go get some food. Like you go eat some carbs and now you kind of are maintaining that level blood amount of sugar. But when you have a meal, it goes up. It might go up to 110. It might go up to 140. It might go up to 200. The number is relative to the type of carbohydrate you eat, how much of it you eat, and that can be like it goes up quickly, it goes up slowly, and this is what the glucose monitors are going to look at. And there's been this sort of like narrative that like if the sugar goes up really high and really fast, that's bad. And that is not that's not a complete accurate view. Part of the reason why it gets that sort of story is that people who are diabetic, and now diabetes is a disease where you have insulin and blood sugar mismanagement. There's multiple types. There's the people who cannot make insulin. That's a type 1 diabetic. And if you can't make insulin, then you could imagine if you eat a bunch of sugar, you've got a problem. The body doesn't have a signal to take that sugar out of the blood. And so now sugar goes up, and it never stops or it stays really high. And what did I say before? It's poisonous.
Yeah.
So that's where diabetics can run into major problems that are type 1. A type 2 diabetic is somebody who makes insulin, but their muscles and their tissues don't respond to it very well. So they get sugar into the blood, then they pump out some insulin from their pancreas, but the insulin's not working. It's not working the way it's supposed to. And so the blood sugar kind of stays elevated longer and longer and longer than it's supposed to. So what we really should be saying is that blood sugar elevation is not bad. It is blood sugar elevation that is prolonged for long periods of time that is problematic. Because remember, if it's sugars in the blood for a long time, that's poisonous. It starts to have deleterious effects on the body. We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
So glucose monitoring should be about looking to see if you have extended periods of elevation in your glucose. Not, oh my gosh, I put this glucose monitor on, I ate oatmeal and it spiked my blood sugar. I should never eat oatmeal again.
Right.
And that is how people are interpreting the results of these in a lot of different circumstances. If you're not diabetic, which you probably know through other health screens, if you are type 1 diabetic, you absolutely know, because you have likely gone through a very, very serious critical event where you were then diagnosed, possibly like a diabetic coma. If you're type 2 diabetic or you have insulin resistance, you're also probably aware that you have some health complications, or you're generally, this falls into the person that's obese or has other complicating metabolic health symptoms going on.
Yeah.
Now, there are plenty of people who are of normal weight and who don't present as the typical sort of obese patient who has insulin resistance that do have emerging type 2 diabetes. And this is why getting your routine blood work to look at your fasting glucose, to also look at your fasting insulin levels, to is useful to sort of screen for, is this becoming a problem for you? And in which case, if you have those conditions, if you have a problem with insulin management, if you are on the type 2 diabetic spectrum or pre-diabetes, then carbohydrates and sugars should be something that you're trying to manage, because you do not want to continue to have these elevated blood glucose levels, because they're not doing good things for your body.
Yeah.
And you're not in a position to manage it well. Can you start to fix that? Yes. Diet, exercise, resistance training, all of the things that we talk about can totally correct type 2 insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes. But in most instances, if you don't have that, then monitoring your glucose is really just like purely curiosity and sort of like biohacking optimization. It's sort of in this category of like, is it something every single person should do? Not likely.
Yeah.
Could it lead to some like, misinformation or people getting overly concerned about things that they shouldn't necessarily be concerned about? Yes. And that's one of the problems of doing it. In my instance, I use it because I was very curious to see like what is happening in my body.
Yeah.
What are my levels at different times of the day? If you wear one, you come to find out that high intensity exercise will spike your glucose, which is totally normal. Why? Because you're starting to do something intense. What does the liver want to do? It wants to pump out some glucose so that the muscles can work and get more energy. Okay, cool. I learned that, right? Or if you're really stressed, or if you, in some instances, you like drink a bunch of caffeine, or certain carbohydrates, maybe, spike the glucose more than other carbohydrates. Maybe you find out that if you eat a food that really spikes your glucose, and then you have a subsequent, drop in glucose, like maybe it makes you feel a little foggy, or maybe it makes you feel a little tired, or you start to equate it to like, oh, when I ate that thing and I saw the spike and then I didn't feel so good. Maybe you start to draw these correlations, but you can make all those correlations with just general awareness of like, yeah, when I ate the candy bar at 3 p.m, like at 4, I felt like crap.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know if I need you to go see that there was a spike in your blood sugar. And then the other misconception is that you cannot lose body fat. You can't lose fat if you're spiking your insulin all the time. People are saying like insulin is this like the enemy of fat loss. Like if you have insulin in your body, you shut down fat loss. And that is really pervasive out there. It's like,
Right.
oh, I got to not have any of this thing.
Yeah.
I can't have any of the sugars. I can't.
Sugar's bad.
I have to.
and-
I can eat carbs, but I can't eat carbs that spike my
Spike
blood
my
sugar,
glucose, yeah.
which are like quote unquote. Well, not quote unquote. They are high glycemic carbs. Glycemic index, high glycemic, low glycemic, refers to how quickly these carbs absorb into your digest and absorb, and therefore spike the blood sugar. So people are like, well, I want to lose body fat, so I definitely can't have a banana because that would spike my blood sugar. I definitely can't have a glass of orange juice because that'll spike my blood sugar. And there have been countless people now that have just like completely debunked that
Yeah.
through just like, look, I'm wearing this, glucose monitor. I'm going to intentionally spike my blood sugar every day for the next 30 days, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to lose 10 pounds.
Right.
And it's like, yep, it works because the barrier to losing body fat is not how much insulin you have going on. It is your calories in, calories out. It's like the energy balance that you have going on. So this is not all to say like glucose spikes are fine for everybody and that they're not problematic. I think I've already stated that like if you have dysfunctional insulin resistance or diabetes type 2 or pre-diabetes, if you're metabolically unhealthy, like, you have anything that would be considered like heart disease risk or, some of these chronic illnesses, it's probably worth your while to stick to foods that are not going to deliver a big bunch of sugar to your body all at once, a big bunch of carbs to your body all at once. There's a lot of reasons for that have nothing to do with glucose spikes, but glucose spike could be one of them. We just don't want to put you in a situation. So if you're metabolically unwell and you're like struggling with that, then this could be something to care about. But does it require monitoring or continuous monitoring on your, on your arm with a device? Not necessarily. And that would be for your healthcare provider to decide anyway. It's like, hey, I want to put you on this glucose monitor because I want to see what's happening. I want to use this to help you optimize the diet that we want you on.
Yeah.
But I also find that like, intuitively and just with general recommendations on healthy diet, like you can get pretty far without having to actually investigate these like specific health markers.
Yeah.
So I realized that I just really went on a tear there. And I didn't really leave a lot of room for commentary from you, but what didn't make sense or what questions did we leave out?
I think that we covered pretty much everything that was on our list. And to me, it's just very educational and useful to hear things like this because there's the whole category of the actual science of it. And then there's the whole how it trickles out into social media. And when you just see people doing these things and you don't know why, or people say things like a banana's bad, or like, it just gives a lot more context to make decisions that are more evidence-based.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad I hope others that are listening or watching got some value out of hearing about that. I'd love to know what questions people still have on this. We don't have to hit it in a full episode, but we can do a couple rapid fire questions if people have sugar, glucose monitoring questions, insulin questions. And I would just say that something that I have known or I have experienced anecdotally is that when there are big glucose spikes, if I eat a lot of if there's a big thing of sugars that I take in right pre-bed, that has been impactful in a negative way on my sleep.
Yeah.
And I think some people experience that as well. So
I've experienced that. Yeah.
that's something, to just be mindful of, but again, not requiring a monitor to tell you that, you had like a whole chocolate bar, or 2 chocolate bars right before bed and got like a lot of sugar, or you ate a ton of ice cream right before bed and you're like, oh, I slept like crap. It's like, well, maybe that's not, versus like right before bed, you had 3 carrots and that didn't like have this big bunch of sugar that just went into your body.
Yep.
And you slept fine.
Yep.
So take home lesson: ditch the ice cream and have some carrots because it's about the same thing. Just kidding. JK. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in. Send your questions in, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thanks.